he would go and fly with the different groups by that point, and not be assigned. He wasn't assigned to a particular squadron, but by then. He scored his 40th victory in the Philippines in November and got sent home. This is him in New Guinea. And this was his commanding officer, David McDonald, who was the third scoring Air Force ace of the Pacific. The 475th Fighter Group basically had all three. Long flew with the 475th for a while. McGuire and McDonald flew. The 475th is a very interesting group because they were formed in the Pacific. They wanted to get P-38s, and they could only get P-38s for a squadron to each of the fighter groups down there, and the other two squadrons were flying P-39s or P-40s. Finally, they got an opportunity to get a shipment of P-38s, and General Kenny contacted all the groups and said, "I want your best pilots. You aren't giving me any of your. This isn't one of the typical things where you're supposed to give me 5 pilots and give me your 5 worst." And he formed the 475th in the summer of '43 in Australia, and it was the only all P-38 group until for the next year until the 49th got P-38 for their next 2 squadrons. But they were the elite squadron for the 5th elite air group for the 5th Air Force. This is the guy that was the 475th top guy, Tommy McGuire, 38 victory. He was constantly in competition with Baum. He got within one of Baum at one point, and then when Baum scored 40 and was going back to the city, Kenny officially grounded him until Baum got home and got his Medal of Honor. He said, "I don't want you scoring until he does." Then he finally was released, and he went out and he scored 7 pretty quickly, and then he ended up going out on a mission where he figured he was going to beat. He had 38. He figured he always scored 2 or 3 at a time, so he figured, well, we'll go out and this time I'll finally beat Baum. And they went out, and they saw one Japanese fighter flying low over Negros Island, and he decided he would drop down, knock the guy off, and fly out. So he didn't drop his drop tank, which was still about half full, made the airplane very heavy. Turned out, at that time there were 2 kinds of Japanese pilots left, very good and very bad. And the guy that they managed to run across was one of the top scoring Japanese Army Air Force aces of the war, and McGuire got low and slow over the jungle with an airplane that was too heavy to be fighting like he was doing, stalled and went in. That was it. It was an Oscar. You don't get low and slow with an Oscar. And here's McGuire again with Charles Lindbergh. Lindbergh came out to the Pacific in 1944, and as a tech representative for United Technologies, and he went to the Central Pacific, and he went with the Marines, and he showed them how to increase the bomb load on their Corsairs by double, and also double their range by how to manage their fuel better. Then he came down to New Guinea, and he went to the 475th, and he taught them how to fly, how to extend the range, which was to fly low res and high propeller pitch, and they extended the range from 3.5 hours to 7 hours. I talked to a couple of guys from the 475th, and they said, what we discovered after that was that you didn't have anything to drink for 2 hours before you. Fuel management, but it changed everything for them. By that point, when they were in continue, they could fly clear into Indonesia and Borneo. This is J.T. Robbins, who was the fourth-ranking ace of the name is Jay and Dinah for his wife, who was an Army nurse he met in Australia. He later ended up with he made it all the way to 4 stars. But he was the first P-38 ace after Baum in 43 with the 80th Headhunters. This is Tony LaVere, who's one of the coolest guys that ever lived. He's been called the Huckleberry Finn of aviation. Having known him, that's a pretty good description of him. He started flying when he was 15. As he told me, that was back when there were 55 airfields in Los Angeles County.
Wow.
And he first started learning to fly in a monocoupe with a 3-cylinder Anzani radio, which he later restored. It was down at the museum in Los Angeles for many years. It's now at the National Air and Space Museum. But in the 70s, he restored it, and he would fly it around, and he brought it up to Watsonville one year, and I got to get a ride with it. That's not an easy airplane to fly. When you consider training in a monocoupe, the learning curve is pretty steep right off the bat. If you go over to the racer's hangar, you'll see a little yellow airplane up hanging on the wall that looks like it's a model. It looks like the RC model by size, a big RC model, but still an RC model. That's the Schoenfeld firecracker, which he took second place with in the 1939 Thompson Trophy. And this is when he was flying for Lockheed. He was there. He became a test pilot there in 42, and in 44 they sent him over to England because the guys in the P-38 groups in England were afraid of their airplanes. With the problem with the dive brakes. This is before the dive brakes and all that. And so he went over and spent about 6 weeks, and he went to each of the groups, and he introduced everybody, and he said, "Give me the worst airplane in the group." And they would pull out the hangar clean and fire it up, and he would go out and put on an air show. And he'd come back and he'd tell the guys exactly what he'd done with power settings and everything else, and they think, okay, if he could do that with that airplane, I guess I can fly mine. And changed the whole thing with the P-38 groups in England. Well, everybody knows that. I mean, if you've been around, some of the guys that have great names also have great egos. And you can usually tell the ego coming through the door before you see the guy. With Tony LaVere, who probably had more reason to have a great ego than the rest of them combined, you never knew where he was until he walked up behind him. This is his P-38 that he raced in Thompson Trophy. Bought it for $500 and raced it for 3 years. There he is racing. Bendix. And here's the 5 surviving P-38, the 10,000. These are the 5 that still fly. There are supposed to be 2 others that are in process of being restored to flight. So, it has. Well, okay, so we now have 6 that are flying, and the 7th that should be. These are the 5 that are in North America. That's a hell of a formation. And this is one of the first P-38Fs that was considered combat worthy. I don't know how I managed to get that out of one. So the P-38E. You can see the difference. These ended up being used. They were not considered that combat worthy as the F, but they ended up being used in Alaska because That air kept the turbocharger a little bit warmer than the usual open thing. And so it ended up being flown in Alaska and clear up until 44. This is a P-38 of the 20th Fighter Group in England.
Thank you, Tom. Like I said, I've forgotten more than I've ever learned. So, what we can do now, we got, we're looking at about 11:34. What we can do now is we can maybe field a few questions and answers to our panelists up here. And if somebody has a question regarding the P-38 or any of the intricacies of it, raise your hand and we'll come around to you. And please stand up and sound off. Everybody can hear the question.
Tom or either one of you gentlemen, I understand whenever they went out for the Yamamoto mission that the compass that was actually in those P-38s was not accurate enough, and so they actually used the Navy compass to guide them there. Is that true or false?
My take on the story is they kind of figured the timing that Yamamoto's formation was going to be coming over Bougainville, and they basically took off and did it by dead reckoning. Yeah, I don't think they had a compass, but I'm not exactly sure.
They were flying high enough that they could keep the Solomon Islands in view, visual view, and by flying, they were about 50 miles away from there. And down there you can keep track of the islands by the clouds above them. So that was the basic, and it was definitely dead reckoning, but it was dead reckoning with a watch.
Everybody's a P-38 expert? I don't see any hands. Oh, here's one.
I read in I think my Profiles book or something on the P-38 years ago that I don't remember if it was England's request that they wanted a couple of them to test out, and they wanted them both engines turning the same direction and no turbochargers.
And that's exactly why they didn't get them. Because once they flew the airplane, the characteristics, it wasn't favorable.
I heard they complained about no high altitude performance.
Yeah, well, obviously, with the Allison engine of the day, roughly 1,100 horsepower, unsupercharged, those airplanes, yeah, they weren't going to do any good after about 15,000 feet. So for the European theater, that definitely wouldn't have been an asset, where the air of combat was twice that high.
Yeah, there was 20 of them, and they got turned into trainers. They were called the RP-38 here.
I think the Lockheed number was 322 on them, and they were just they didn't work out very well. I don't know why they wanted both engines the same, probably for commonality of spares or something like that, but it really didn't make the airplane fly right.
Another question. You mentioned about the night fighter, the gentleman who sat in the back and actually operated the radar. Couldn't be over 5'5". Well, that guy in that troops suit who was doing the bombing, he couldn't have been very big either.
Yeah, the back seat the back seat is a very small seat. The front cockpit of the P-38 is that they gave most of the, I don't know, we've got a P-38 panel right here from 476 to find out how big he is. Turns out we have a member of the 476 fighter group here with us today.
I was with the 475th Fighter Group, and my squadron was 431st Fighter Squadron, and the airplane that I flew was a P-38, and the number of it was 138. That was in use, and I flew. I got over late. I was a young member of the volunteers, got in the Philippines, and then from the Philippines we moved up to Okinawa, Japan, and then eventually got over to South Korea, the war of occupation, and we trained and got ourselves equipped for taking care of the 38 parallel line. So I had a unique aircraft. Everything was 138. My name was Tony M. Paplia, and I was a flight officer. I never made I didn't care. I wanted to fly a period.
On the mic.
It flew like it took care of me, boy.
I heard that there was a more advanced version of P-38 known as the chain lightning that was in the experimental stage.
That was a much larger airplane. It was in the same configuration as the, I think it was XP-58, and it was a much heavier, larger airplane than the P-38, and really never went much past the prototype stage. They didn't put them in production. It was basically the war was winding down, and the P-38 production was already successful, and airplane was kind of like somewhere between a P-38 and a P-61 Black Widow. It was a pretty big airplane. And I don't think the tests were too favorable with it. I think they had problems with the engines as well. But it was the same configuration as the Lightning, yes. It's just a much larger airplane and only never got past the prototype stage. Yeah, flight test.
Okay, I have a question on the Black Widow.
Hold on.
Okay, this is for the Colonel here. When you said, I believe you said that you got an engine shot out and you wanted to head back to England, and they told you to make a 45-degree change, and you said that didn't sound right. You figured it was probably the Germans telling you that, and you said you turned 10 degrees and it worked out good for you. Where do you think you would have ended up if you would have taken that advice and gone that 45 degrees? Probably been a prisoner of war.
Was the P-38, as I understand, was the first airplane we ever had that went from cables to hydraulics to control the flight system?
I don't know all the intricacies of that. We need Chris Fahey in here to answer all that. But Tom may have some information on that.
Yeah, the P-38L was the one that went to hydraulic control. The basically power steering, yeah.
But that was the ailerons only. That wasn't the elevator or the rudders. That was just ailerons only, the power steering. Anybody else? We got time for maybe one more. Here's one over here, Steve, this young man. He's hugging the mic around there.
My grandfather taught radio. Could you tell me a little bit about how the radio worked and how hard it was to use?
I'm going to pass you over to this gentleman. Talk about the use of the P-38 communication system, the radio.
As far as I could tell, it worked fine for me. One of the great things that they could do for you, if you're out over some of the enemy territory, or out in the North Sea, they could triangulate you and they can contact you on the radio. And reception, if you're maybe 10,000 feet or above, the reception is great. If you're down maybe 2,000 or 3,000 feet, the reception wasn't that good. But sometimes we get the assignment. If we're going into deep Germany, a pilot gets the assignment to circle over the lowland countries in Holland and Belgium at maybe 30,000 feet to pick up the radio talk from the planes. Our planes are all in Berlin, and then we could relay those messages into England. That was one of pretty close control of where our planes were and what conditions were out there.
Thank you. I think that's about all the time we have for questions. You can, any of you can come up and talk to the panelists here afterwards, if you will. Also, Tom Cleaver has a couple books left here that he's going to sell. Before we all get up, though, please stay seated.